Hi everyone. I'll be the host for today's meeting. I wanted to start out by introducing myself. My name is Madison Trabasket Windsor. I am siwڵkʷ or siwڵkʷ from Blank Creek. My parents are Carrie Trabasket and Marshall Windsor, and my grandfather is the late Jim Trabasket. I currently work for ONA Natural Resources in the water program as a water project coordinator. And to start, thank you everyone who has joined us today and the presenters who have given us their time. I'll be introducing today's webinar and speakers, after which I'll be handing it over to our presenters. Once they've wrapped up at 1 p.m., there will be a short Q&A period for any questions, and feel free to put any questions in the chat box as well as you think about them. Today's webinar is on Beaver Mimicry, and it is a part of our broader work as the Silk Nation Water Working Group, where we're coming together as technical staff, leadership, policy advisors, and community water champions to strengthen our collective voice on water governance. This webinar series was created in response to the feedback expressing a desire to learn more about our water and the work being done at the nation level to support member communities. One of our key program priorities is the restoration and protection of upper watersheds and exploring beaver mimicry and the reintroduction of beaver-based solutions. They're also known as BDAs or beaver dam analogs. And for us, it's more about siwڵkʷ-ing the process, working with the land and the water in the ways that honor our laws, our knowledge, and our relationship with the land. Through our Silk worldview, we know that beavers are very powerful beings of water, and they've been restoring balance in these water systems long before any colonial infrastructure reshaped our landscape. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Emily Fairfax. She is the Assistant Professor of Physical Geography at University of Minnesota. Dr. Emily Fairfax is a scientist, educator, and storyteller whose research focuses on the remarkable ways that beavers create fire and drought-resistant landscapes. Her work uses satellite imagery, field observations, and ecological storytelling to show how these small animals have massive impacts on water retention and landscape resilience. Emily's passion lies in making science accessible and engaging, particularly when it intersects with climate adaptation and restoration, ecology, and indigenous land relationships.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Let me just send a screen share request real fast. So I'm super excited to talk to folks today about mimicking beavers for wildfire resistance. This has been a direction that my research has really started to focus on, in large part due to conversations with a lot of different people who want beavers back and want to work with beavers and partner with beavers, but just don't know where to start, and the beavers are not currently present. So sort of what can we do in the meantime, and how can we set it up for beavers to be successful? Beavers are super powerful ecosystem engineers. There have been all sorts of different books and guides trying to describe the full suite of things that beavers are doing and to tie it back to understandings of streams and wetlands and floodplains in a way that is actionable and that can get different agencies on board and try to just bring us all together to work with beavers instead of following what has been the sort of status quo for the last couple hundred years of trapping beavers, removing beavers, and trying to control nature. So beavers as ecosystem engineers, one of the things that makes them so impressive and so powerful is they can take even incredibly degraded streams that have incised and cut away from their floodplains, streams that have been overgrazed, streams that have had too much drying, too much climate change. And the beavers move in and they build their dam. That dam will start to slow down the water, buff back up that riparian ecosystem, and then the beavers aren't going to just stop with that. And that's one of the keys to their success. They're going to keep building. They're going to expand that dam. They want a larger pond. They want more aquatic area. Beavers are incredibly agile and in control when they're swimming in the water. And even though they are technically a semi-aquatic rodent, the aquatic is really where they feel most comfortable. And that's clear when they're out on the land. They're very awkward on land. And over the last 7.5 million years or so, beavers figured out not only how to build dams, but also how to dig canals. And these canals are like little micro streams that radiate outwards from those beaver ponds across valley bottoms, across landscapes, and they're the highways for beavers. The beavers can jump in, swim around the landscape, get their food, get their building materials, and feel safer and escape predators much more easily than if they didn't have that. And for a long time, I think the canal networks were sort of underappreciated with beavers. The pond is definitely a very large and important surface water feature, but the canals take a beaver from influencing, you know, half a square kilometer of land to influencing multiple square kilometers of land. So we're really starting to understand just how impactful individual beavers can be. And as climate's changing, their impacts are really starting to show up in a much bigger way than maybe has been obvious as before. So I've got this diagram here that's made its rounds several times online, so you may have seen it, but just in case you haven't, I want to walk through it briefly. Streams without beavers are going to be on the left-hand side of this panel, and streams with beavers are going to be on the right. Now, in the very top row, we have a rainy period. So there's infiltrating precipitation. That could be rain falling on the soil, that could be snow melting. It doesn't really matter where the water is coming from, but you do have water coming from above. All the plants are happy. They can all reach water with their roots. They're all going to be green and productive. This is true in both the stream with beavers and the stream without beavers. During our rainier periods, we don't as visually see the impact of beavers on vegetation health and security as when we enter drought periods, which is the second row. Once we're in a drought and you take away that infiltrating precipitation, all the plants are now very reliant on water that's been stored in the soil or on the groundwater system. Many plant roots cannot reach true aquifers. A lot of the times our water table is sitting tens to hundreds of meters deep, and the plant roots are just not capable of reaching into that and drinking it up. So they rely on soil water. And when streams are degraded, they have very little connection to that soil system. So it's hard for them to put water in, and it's hard for them to store it. And that's where we see an unfortunately frequent phenomenon, especially in the western half of the continent, where during your wet period, you build up this huge amount of biomass and all this vegetation grows. And then as soon as you enter your summertime drought, it all dries up and it becomes extremely flammable. That's not the case where beavers do their engineering. The pond itself is a larger water feature. It affects more of the soil water area, but then every single one of the canals that beavers are digging is like a micro stream that effectively pins groundwater up at the surface and makes it so there are a lot of different places for that runoff, that rainfall to make it into the soil and go on much slower flow paths and be available to the plants for much longer periods. I've done some research myself in Nevada that looked at how long beavers could help ecosystems resist drought. And I found they can do it for at least 3 years of continuous extreme drought. It could have been more. The drought ended in Nevada, so I did not have the ability to continue seeing how much longer they could have gone. But at least 3 years, beaver wetlands and the valley bottoms around them were as green as irrigated alfalfa fields. Whereas the river corridors that didn't have beavers in them were immediately shutting down and becoming very dry and non-productive as early as June in some years. This matters a lot when we have the threat of wildfire. Wildfire is going to happen from lightning strikes and campfires and all sorts of other reasons. And when it does, it's going to burn whatever's easiest to burn. And unfortunately, a dry river corridor is one of the easiest things to burn. There's a lot of material there. It's very dry. It's highly flammable. And so we've actually seen unhealthy rivers and streams move fire across landscapes faster. It acts like a wick. But if the beavers are there, and if we have their infrastructure in place, because they're able to resist the droughts, and they can resist the droughts because they're able to store water during the wetter periods, then they are also able to keep things green and healthy during our wildfire periods. And it's not just a conceptual model. We've studied this. This photo on the left-hand side of the slide is a beaver engineered corridor that I visited a few times in Wyoming, where the beaver wetlands are just completely green, unburnt, productive, protected, and the surrounding landscape is devastated. It was hit with several disturbances in a row. There was drought, there was beetle kill, there was fire, and then there was blowdown. And the end result is now 5 years post-fire, we're still not seeing recovery except in the beaver wetlands. And that's where we have all of the plants in their mature state. That's where we have all of the animals spending their time. And that's where we still have cool, clear water. The streams without the beavers within this particular fire scar are still in very rough shape. Recovery takes a long time when it's a mega fire. And I found this is a very consistent effect. Beaver dammed areas are about 3 times more fire resistant than river corridors without beavers. And even during megafires, we see about 90% of the area that beavers engineer resisting that and being what's called fire refugia, as in it does not burn, or it just has very low intensity burning that is helpful and beneficial for the soil and the organisms. This is a lot more than our rivers without beavers. That's sitting at about 60%, which is barely better than a coin flip. And then outside our river corridor, we're looking about 37% fire refugia. When we have a lot of larger, more open spaces, it's really important to have fire refugia available. These are the places that animals will seek out to survive the fire, especially those that can't outrun, outfly, or outswim. To completely escape the fire overall, they need to find a wetland patch, and we've seen a lot of different animals make use of this. We're also seeing these beaver engineered corridors be integrated into fire mitigation efforts that people are doing. Can we backburn off of this? Can we do our fuel mitigation around this? Can we think about this as a defensible space so that when a fire does come through, we know, okay, this area is safe. Let's put our time and effort on this place that needs more of our attention that maybe beavers are not working on. And it's a profound effect. When I visit these sites on the ground, every time I'm struck at just how big of a change there is when you move into the beaver wetlands and how short of a length scale it is to get there. You go from these forest fires that are burning at incredibly high intensity. The soil's burning, the roots are burning, the trees are burning. There's literally nothing left. It's silent in the forest. There's no leaves, there's no insects, there's nothing. And then within 10 meters max, sometimes as few as 3, you're now in a completely unburnt patch. Beavers are unparalleled in their ability to create very resistant and resilient wetlands. And that's something that we've taken a lot of interest in. I have been asked a lot lately, though, can beavers actually stop fires and can beaver wetlands stop fires? This question comes up often when we think about beaver restoration and beaver mimicry. How much can we expect from them? I don't have complete results yet, but I wanted to share a little bit of my preliminary data. We see both fire refugia and fire breaking in our fires. So in fire refugia, we have the fire approach a beaver wetland, stall, and then the wind will blow an ember to the other side, and then it'll keep burning. And so they didn't stop the fire, at least not permanently. Maybe they stalled it a little bit, but they did protect a patch or a strip. And so that's fire refugia. That happens everywhere. I've seen that in every single ecosystem I've looked in. Fire breaking, though, is when we're looking for the fire to approach the beaver wetland and actually be stopped. Meaningful changes to fire behavior driven by the presence of beaver engineering. And looking for this, we've now found about 15 fires where this has occurred. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of what that looks like. So this kind of tiny panel, blown up bigger, what you're seeing is the fire spread in these orangish colors. And then mapped out with those little pink lines is the position of every beaver dam in this particular river corridor. And this is data from a fire in Colorado, but we have been looking at fires across the western half of the continent, from Alaska all the way down to Arizona and New Mexico. And so as the fires move through, we see them butt up against the river corridor that the beavers are working over and over and over again. This is not a case of the fire never tried to press into the beaver wetlands. It never tried to press into the river corridor. It did many times. It burned right up to the edge and then came back and tried to burn to the edge again and failed. In this particular fire, as soon as this fire took off, that whole valley bottom was considered contained. There was enough confidence in the beaver engineering and the width of the wetland there that no firefighting efforts were staged on that particular area. They were instead used on the other parts of the fire to get containment of it faster and not let it cascade into a mega fire. That is really the concern at this site. There's a limited window to let fires burn within their fire regime before they just take off and wind up consuming 400,000 acres with a lot of high severity. So sometimes we do see beavers and their wetlands genuinely stop fire. Other times we don't. And they don't sometimes because the fire is blowing in the same direction as sort of the strip of the beaver wetlands. And so it's going to burn on both sides. They were never in the way of the fire. They were just a little band in line with the fire. So sometimes, no, they can't. And it's not anyone's fault. It's not the beaver's fault. It's just how the fire was burning. Sometimes no, and this one's more actionable because there's breakthrough spots. So we'll see beavers damming up corridors, but it's not continuous. There's a big patch here and then a big gap of unrestored area and then another patch of good beaver habitat. Those good beaver habitat patches stay refugia, but then the fire will find those little spots in between that are still degraded and burn through there. And then when we could have had fire breaking, we wind up with just refugia because we don't have enough beavers yet. And that has spurred a lot more questions about, can we change this partially rebeavered landscape into a more fully rebeavered landscape with beaver mimicry? So how do we actually achieve this kind of fire resistance through our own actions? Can we pretend to be the beavers? The answer is yes, but not in the way that I'm doing on this particular picture. I am mostly a remote sensing and drone pilot scientist, so a lot of my field work, I just have to be on the side of the pond with a controller flying a drone around, which means that I also get to float around in my beaver floaty when the rest of the team is doing a lot of really difficult vegetation surveys and things like that. So we want to know about beaver mimicry. Can you be the beaver? There's also lots of guides and things that have been written about how we should be beavers, whole books saying do this, do that. And interestingly, some of the things that are recommended are not things that beavers do, like driving posts into the bank. But they are things that sometimes we need because we're just not as good at building beaver dams as beavers are. And so there's a lot of strategies out here, a lot of things worth trying. There are situations where building what's called a posted BDA like this is absolutely the right call. Your stream flow is too high, it's too flashy, you need help. You don't have as many millions of years of experience building dams as the beavers do, so this is the best we can. But ultimately, when we think about beaver mimicry and BDAs, the goal is bringing back beavers. You shouldn't be building their structures if you don't want the beavers back. And that also means you should be building their structures in a way that reminds you of beavers or that actually looks like how beavers build. A lot of times there's hesitation to build a lot of structures. Beavers will build anywhere from 5 up to 40 dams per kilometer of stream. If we go in and build one BDA, that may not have the effect we want because a beaver would almost never build just one dam. It would have to be a huge and perfect dam for it to be happy with just one. So building lots of structures, letting structures break and bend, changing where we put them, not being so sold on a single specific structure, because as the river changes, the damming needs to change. Beavers know that very well, and we can learn that from them and build better BDAs. And people have been building these for a while. I've been aware of BDA builds going on that have been studyable with my satellites for at least the last 5 to 10 years. And what's changed now is, I guess finally, I'm not excited about this, but it is helpful for science. Finally, some of these are burning. They're going into wildfires, and I can see how well is our mimicry doing specifically for wildfire resistance. So I'm going to show you 2 little tiny case studies. One is for BDAs in meadows, and the other is for BDAs in rivers. So this first one is from the Dixie Fire, which burned in California. It was a huge fire, 900,000 acres or so. And there were a lot of BDAs built within this fire before it happened, and then more were built afterwards as a post-fire restoration technique. This was the specific site is meadow restoration that was done up in Tasman-Coyam, which was a partnership between Swift Water Design, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Mountain Mighty Summit Consortium. And they wanted to bring back beavers to these meadows for both ecological and cultural reasons. And step 1 was building BDAs. It was not ready for actual beavers up there yet. It was too degraded. So getting some BDAs was a big part of preparing it for beavers. And I will make a note, I can no longer study the site as a BDA site because it is now full of beavers, which is great. The goal has been achieved, a real success story here. So I went through in satellite and found actual beaver wetlands. And these are my beaver sites, and I wanted to see what was the burn severity in my beaver sites. And then I also looked at the hill slopes. So these are going to be my most vulnerable places for fire and see how they burned. Were they highly burned? Were they unburned? Here, red is high and blue is unburned. And then I wanted to figure out within here, we have meadows that have not been restored, that are just existing in whatever state they are. What do those look like? And then what do the sites with beaver dam analogs look like? Is adding beaver dam analogs actually improving the fire resistance of our meadows? In our beaver dammed areas, we saw a lot of unburned area. So in these histograms, these are the burn severity histograms. So the more blue we have, the more unburnt it is. In the beaver dammed areas, it's almost exclusively unburnt. Not super surprising. I've seen the beavers do this a lot. I have a lot of faith and trust in them. We looked on the hill slopes. It was a much grimmer scene, a lot more burning in the high severity and moderate severity ranges. So this histogram where it's pretty shifted to the right there, that is not ideal. This is more severe than this particular forest should have had. We looked at the mountain meadows, and in the mountain meadows, we did see more unburnt than the hill slopes. That's good. Even unrestored, they are still retaining some of their natural resilience. However, we did see a much larger tail going out into those moderate and a little bit into the high severity categories. And from looking at these individual meadows, sometimes we saw sort of a pyromosaic, so patches of high severity mixed in with the unburned areas, mixed in with the low severe areas. But sometimes we did see meadows burn in totality, and they're just kind of lumped into this histogram. Where the beaver dam analogs were built, we still do have that tail. We did not lose the tail into moderate and high severity, but we did shift a lot more into the unburned. So we have more unburned area. And looking at the beaver dam analog areas, it's a different manifestation. So even though these histograms look pretty similar, the BDA areas typically had a very unburnt core with burning around the edges, whereas the mountain meadows, some of them were burnt, some of them were unburnt. And so it's a different style of burning that looks pretty similar on these histograms. Overall, we did find that the BDA areas were burning less intensely than the meadows were, and all of them were burning less intensely than the hill slopes were. And that while we are doing a good job building BDAs in getting this lower severity overall, there's still more variability than if it was actual beavers. We are not as consistent as the beavers. We do not create as durable of effect as the beavers, but we are definitely on the right track, at least at the time of this study. And all of these were statistically significant differences. What was cool though at this site is that looking after the fire, so now we're looking at greenness, before the fire, our meadows without restoration and our BDA meadows were about the same in terms of their overall greenness. Then the beaver dammed areas were greener. During the fire, we saw drops in greenness in the meadows with and without BDAs, not really in the beaver dammed areas. But then after the fire, we saw a much faster bounce back and healthier recovery in the BDA meadows than in the meadows that did not have BDAs. And we attribute that to their ability to catch sediment. After the fire, these hill slopes are charred. A lot of material is moving down into the valley bottom, and these BDAs are catching it and helping restore the stream and accelerate that process. So even if we don't see an enormous effect pre-fire in the meadow context, post-fire, we absolutely are seeing the value of them. It is different though when we're talking about river restoration and stream restoration. It's a hydrologically different situation. When we have BDAs built on a smaller stream or on a tributary, that has potential to have a much stronger effect. This is a more degraded system than many of our meadows are. And when we have a fire come through, we find those patches of burn severity that are unburnt. It turns out the BDAs are doing a lot of work to keep our streams unburnt during wildfire scenarios. So I wanted to test specifically if we have a BDA stream and a non-BDA stream, how could we have told ahead of time, basically, that this was going to be fire refugia, or do we have to wait for the fire to happen to know if this is going to be fire refugia? So I looked at the greenness curves, and when we have a healthy riparian zone, we expect to have a nice round greenness curve every year. Things green up, they stay green through the summer, and then they come down and shut down in the autumn. We saw more of a shark wave pattern here, where it comes up fast, we green up quickly, and then we drop off in greenness quickly. So before the BDAs were installed, both my control stream and my future BDA stream experienced drought stress strongly. 2020, 2021 were both drought years. 2022 was a wetter year. You can see a bit of a return to that rounder seasonal arc. That was great. The BDAs get built, and we are looking for things to stay above this dashed line. That indicates 0.3 NDVI vegetation greenness. It's a minimum value I expect in a healthy growing season. It can come below it during the winter and fall, but during summer, we want to see it above that. Build those BDAs, and now during a drought year, when we expect to get that shark wave shape to greenness again, instead we see elevated greenness, and we say it stay above that threshold the entire summer. It does not shut down here until like October, whereas before it was shutting down in June. So there's a fundamental shift in the length of the growing season and the health of vegetation. And this is just a drought year. Then the fire burns, and we see that exact same greenness curve maintained, which means the BDAs that were built here were built in a way that resisted both drought and fire, just like the beavers do, and that we probably could have told in 2023 that this would be fire refugia, because we already had that elevated greenness that we know from beavers means it's going to be fire resistant. And these patches are super important. Looking at them in satellite and thinking about them a lot from just a numbers perspective, it's like, yeah, great, they burn less. But actually visiting them, these are the only patches in some of our fires that have living vegetation left. They're some of the only patches that have fish left. They're some of the only patches that have frogs left. They are absolutely booming with life, and we need to have more of them. I've visited some of these sites that are very isolated, and it's probably too many bears and too many frogs and too many fish in too small of a space because there's not a lot of habitat left. So the more of these we can build, either with beavers or our mimicry of them, the better off the entire ecosystem is going to be, especially after the fire when resources are really thin. So to wrap it up, I have a lot of examples. I could go on for a million years. I won't. Don't worry. Of beavers creating really strong fire refugia. Every biome, I've seen it. Deserts, shrubs, coniferous forests, mixed forests, deciduous forests, peatlands, permafrost. Does not matter where we are. Beavers create fire refugia. We can do this as well. We have the ability, but we need to think about how we're building them. And the more beavery we are in our builds, the stronger the fire resistance is. I've also looked at some examples where we do not see fire resistance, and that is coming from places where we build like a beaver dam analog, and then that's it. So your take-home message is this is definitely doable. It's very promising, but the beavers really have to be the ones showing us how to do it, not just a guidebook. So thanks, and I can pass it to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that amazing presentation. Um, Next up, we have Coulter Roberts. He is the project manager at NTT Resources, LLP. Coulter Roberts is a resource professional with extensive experience in forest and watershed stewardship and has begun to implement beaver dam analogs in high priority water headwater zones. As a project manager at NTT Resources LP, Coulter works within siwڵkw-based forestry practices to ensure that land and waters restoration efforts are grounded in siwڵkw values and reflect the realities of both traditional knowledge and modern environmental science. Going to pass it off to Coulter.
Hi there, just one sec while I figure this out.
You should be able to share your screen when you're ready.
Okay, let me try that. Okay, can you guys see?
Yep, we can see.
Not me. Sorry, one sec. Gotta turn my video on. Sorry. There we go. Now you can see me. Okay. So, okay, here we go. Thanks everyone for joining me. And thank you very much, Madison and Tessa, for having me on the webinar. My name is Coulter Roberts. I work for NTT Resources. We're the forest management company owned by Westbank First Nation, and we manage the Westbank First Nation forest tenures. So today I'm going to be talking about an exciting project that we've been working on for a number of years now. This fall, we'll be conducting our first wetland restoration project using beaver mimicry with BC Wildlife Federation on the Westbank First Nation Community Forest. Before I begin, I just want to make a few acknowledgements. I'm extremely honored and grateful that I get to work and live on the unceded territory of the siwڵkw Nation. I'd also like to thank Westbank First Nation for their support of this project, the Derrickson Family Trapline for the ongoing communication, and for one of the trapline holders coming out and walking the site with us and sharing his knowledge and insights. And to the BC Wildlife Federation for their passion for working on wetland restoration projects like this using beaver dam analogs and engaging First Nations to make this happen. Couldn't have done it without them, and they've been great to work with. Yeah, and also our wildlife biologist that that works with us, Al Pete. He's been contributing to this project the whole way along, and it's great to work with. So some background on the importance of stewing or beaver. A number of years ago, WFN elders and the ONA Forestry Working Group have communicated with NTT Resources the importance of beaver in maintaining a healthy watershed. This is a value that we've incorporated into our 7-generation plan, which is a guiding document that we use to guide our forestry practices, and it incorporates the siwڵkw forestry principles. So once we established this as a strategy for managing watersheds, we began an analysis of the wetlands and streams across the community forest to determine a suitable site for beaver habitat where we could reintroduce beavers and they could provide benefits to that area. We were contacted by BC Wildlife Federation a few years ago. They were looking to help facilitate beaver and watershed restoration projects with beaver dam analogs with First Nations across BC. So the first step with BC Wildlife Federation was to choose a good site. So the things that we were looking for were a wetland or stream that had experienced degradation and would benefit from having beaver dam analogs. The site had to have suitable habitat potential for beavers because the eventual goal is to bring beavers back into this area, which would include deep pool potential and a food source. The gradient of the area had to be low enough. If the water is moving too quickly, a beaver dam analog wouldn't be able to hold back the water. It had to be accessible, and the risks downstream had to be acceptable. So we had to look at roads, culverts, infrastructure, things like that. And it had to be within Westbank First Nations forest tenure. So the site assessments began. We looked at various sites. These are some photos of the BC Wildlife Federation team. There's 2 sites near Peachland. They weren't chosen for various reasons. One of the other sites was called Rabbit Swamp. It's located off the 201 FSR near Big White. It's a large, wide wetland. It had good pool depth and signs of historic beaver presence, but no beavers there currently. It wasn't necessarily a good site for beaver dam analogs just because how wide it was, but there is good beaver habitat now. So our thoughts for this site is down the road, we might bring beavers to the site as is and have it as a reintroduction site. So we'll be coming back to this one in a few years. So the site that we selected was called Derrickson Swamp. It's a stream and wetland complex. It flows from Derrickson Lake. It flows into Tujong Creek. It's part of the Kettle River watershed. This channel of the site was extremely incised. The side channels were becoming disconnected because of the channel incisement. The main channel also dries out during the summer, leading to the wetland no longer being connected to water, and which was leading to quite a bit of plants drying out and dying. There are signs of historic beaver at this site too, which is promising. And there is good habitat potential and a food source. So here's our site. Here's some more photos. The left shows a downstream reach of the site. It's a little more forested, and then further upstream, it becomes more open and wetland-like. So as you can tell from the photo on the right, that's pretty dry looking for a wetland. You can see some channels going through that are no longer connected to water. So those are some of the factors that we were looking at on the site. Here's some more photos showing the dewatering of the streams, causing disconnected and dry side channels. Some photos of historical beaver presence that we've saw. So quite a bit of chewed sticks, and some of the BC Wildlife Federation crew saw signs of lodged sticks in banks. So that's good to see. So the goals for our project are to create 40 to 75 beaver dam analogs and mimic the many benefits that beavers would have naturally played in this area. So we're looking to store water at higher elevation in this watershed and release it slowly throughout the summer, which would extend flows, providing a more extended water period for this watershed. it should reduce the peak flow intensity and potential for erosion. The raising of the water levels will spread water across the floodplains and reconnect the disconnected side channels and re-wet the wetland. So the wetland ecosystem as a whole will be enhanced and provide connectivity for fish and other plants and animals. And of course, like we just heard, wildfire resiliency. And of course, one of the major goals is to restore beaver habitat and eventually reintroduce beavers to the site. And then the beavers can maintain the system that we've created. So part of the planning process, BC Wildlife Federation flew the area with their drones to assess the site and create an ortho image that they could analyze. We also provided our LiDAR data where they could basically strip the trees off the land and look at what the landscape looked like and plan where the beaver dam analogs would be built. And they can model what the inundation by water will look like. So they can model how the water will be affected by each BDA. A component that we started in May for this project was pre-construction monitoring. So BC Wildlife Federation installed data loggers throughout the site. These measure groundwater levels and the volume of stream flow. We also installed wildlife cameras to monitor wildlife use prior to the construction. And then we'll look at these after the construction is complete and see how the beaver dam analogs have affected groundwater levels, stream flow, and the use by wildlife. So those data loggers are currently in place right now. So they take the data over months at a time and can store that. Let's see, sorry. So yeah, our construction will begin in September of this year. So at NTT Resources, we have a forestry crew. They do projects for us like fire mitigation and things like that. So they're going to be on site assisting with falling trees and kind of processing those for BC Wildlife Federation into construction materials. So the construction will consist of all materials that are found on site. And then other members of our staff will be on site assisting as well. So the plan for this year is to build, depending on how the construction goes, 20 to 30 structures. And then we can assess how the results of that have worked out for us. And then we can, we're planning to do another round of construction in following years. So it'll be a multi-phased approach. That was a little quick, but thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thanks, Coulter, for presenting to us. I will, there'll be a Q&A period afterwards as well for them to ask.
Okay.
And also in the chat as well.
For sure.
And then our next speaker is Delaney Hall. He is the Temik technician for Okanagan Nation Alliance. Delaney Hall is a member of the Osage Indian Band and serves as a Temik technician with the Okanagan Nation Alliance Natural Resource Department. With over 20 years of experience working on the land, Delaney brings a strong foundation in siwڵkʷ forestry, fisheries, and horticulture. He supports a range of nation-level wildlife initiatives and is currently leading the implementation of beaver dam analogs in the Inkaneep and Cote Creek watersheds. He is also helping to restore water systems and protect Temik through culturally grounded restoration practices. Casey, is he on your account or is he on
He's on my computer. I'm just helping to get this share screen going. Can you see our screen?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
You just advance the arrow.
Why hustle halt In siwڵkʷ Quilsnina, in summa squeezed Delaney Hall, Kintil in Kamip. Hello, good day. My Indian name is Red Owl. My shaman name is Delaney Hall. I am from Inkamip. My father is Mario George from Inkamip, Osuyas Indian Band. My mother is Sonia Hall from Zucht of Lower Nicola Indian Band of the siwڵkʷ. I work at the Okanagan Nation Alliance Natural Resource Department as a Timuch technician. We work on a number of projects for the nation. ONA works on projects that are endorsed and deemed as a priority by the nation. We have such an outstanding team here at the ONA that work tirelessly for our nation. They help and support all the communities within our nation. Some of the projects we have been involved with include bighorn sheep, mountain goats, cougars, lynx, grizzly bears, snakes, bullfrogs, birds, bats, whitetail, mule deer, and owls. There's something that we would like to pursue, something that has not been addressed yet and is near and dear to my heart, something I've been talking about for 20 plus years, riparian areas along the edges of our waterways. So we are here to talk for the water. We need water at the forefront of industry and not play catch up trying to fix it after the fact. We need to be proactive and strategic, not reactive. We have entered into a time of flood, drought, and fire. But this is part of a bigger conversation we need to have. When you talk about the water, you need to talk about the land and all living things. So we're here to talk for the Timhulauch, the land. We are here to talk for the Timich, all living things, the forest, the wildlife, and plants, as they are all connected. The laws, policies, practices, and standards that industry follows today are failing us, our water, our land, our forests, our wildlife, and plants. I must be clear, I'm not against progress. Things can be done in a sustainable manner. You just can't call it sustainable and then do whatever the hell you want. First, the beaver, the buffalo, the caribou, the antelope, the salmon, the chinook, mountain sheep, mountain goat, porcupine. I do not want to be at the same table 10 years from now talking about a different species we use to sustain ourselves. I was told as a child in the beginning of time before people, there were only animals and plants, and the Creator had gathered them all together and said, the new people will be coming soon. We must help them. They will have nothing. Salmon was the first to stand up. I will take care of the people, and I offer my flesh for food and all that live in the water as well. Bear stood up and said, I will offer my flesh for food and fur for clothing and all that live on the land as well. Saskatoon bear stood up and said, I will offer my flesh for food and all that grow above the ground as well. Bitterroot stood up, I will offer my flesh for food and all that grow beneath the ground as well. It has come to a time in our lives that we must stand up together and protect the ones that have stood up before us to help us sustain our lives. We must protect our relatives, the ones who cannot speak for themselves, for we are the caretakers of this land. Since I was a young child, I have seen our landscape change drastically for the worst, and I have witnessed, as many others within our nation, the population of all wildlife that we used to sustain ourselves, like deer, elk, moose, have all suffered a big loss in numbers. We need to act now to protect the water, land, forest, wildlife, and plants for future generations. Our way of life is being threatened. As I got older, I wanted to instill some meaningful change in logging, as I saw it as one of the biggest contributors of what I was seeing on the land. I figured I could help change it from the inside, and I became a faller of 15 years. And in shutdown times, I was employed in fisheries. After I put my saw away, I pursued a path of horticulture and now a wildlife technician. As a faller, I was not able to make any meaningful change. I was told those are good ideas, but we aren't doing anything wrong. We are following the rules laid out by the government. The way logging is performed today, well, let's call it what it really is, deforestation, a total destruction of habitat. This needs to be addressed. Deforestation reduces the flow of moisture from the ground to the atmosphere, interrupting the natural rain cycle, and in turn, reducing the rain. It takes 2,500 seedlings to exchange the same amount of CO2 to oxygen than one old growth tree has the ability to do. To protect our water, land, forest, wildlife, and plants, the forest cannot be harvested in such a way as one of the cornerstones of all life to survive. Some of our forests also need to remain undisturbed in the highlands at the headwaters to protect the water, land, forest, wildlife, and plants. It would also help the snowpack from melting so quickly in the spring thaw, as under the canopy of trees, there's a temperature difference than out in the clear cut. The rapid snow melt and rain runoff from all these large, wide open clear cuts has increased the water flow of our streams and creeks. It has degraded them, and they have suffered lots of erosion. And some streams and creek beds are up to 6 feet lower than they used to be and have dropped the water table, and a lot do not engage the floodplain or wetland anymore, which is such an important, rich landscape for all wildlife. Every passing year, the floods have been steadily worse as more material and sediment has been filling our rivers, which has been destroying fish habitat. The Okanagan Nation Alliance Fisheries Department has been doing such an outstanding job bringing the salmon home, but our watersheds need to be protected from the top to the bottom, or it will continue to be an uphill battle. Now we are faced with less snow every year. Our waterways, wetland riparian areas need to be protected better. If waterways, wetland riparian areas are established as critical habitat for all wildlife and fish, then they can be protected as such, restored and enhanced for free movement along the waterways for all animals to have their little ones. Currently, BC Hydro has a practice of considering all streams fish bearing. This is an agreement between DFO, Ministry of Environment, and BC Hydro. All industries should follow and adopt this. The minimum industry standard for riparian buffers on all waterways should be 50 meters from top of bank to ensure stream health, wildlife, and fish habitat and water quality, as all waterways are important. All trees should be retained within riparian zone to ensure shade for temperature regulation and help trap sediment to ensure any unnecessary damage to fish habitat and water quality. I've seen trees cut in riparian zones leaving half stumps like 8 feet high, and contractors say we leave them that high because we need to leave shade for the water and fish and bird habitat. No, riparian areas need all trees, not some trees, not dead cut trees, all trees. I've seen trees cut right to the edge of wetlands, and contractors say, that's not a wetland, it's dry. Even seasonal wetland and seasonal runoff are all very important. Trees play an important role in these areas. They help with retaining water in the soil, stabilizing the soil, and preventing erosion. When doing restoration and enhancement, we need to think in terms of best bang for your buck. What will be the most beneficial for all? There's a solution, not the end-all solution, but it will help in going in the right direction and help make some real change by restoring and enhancing wetland and riparian habitat to reduce the severity of flood, drought, and fire with building beaver dam analogs and post-assisted log structures, as others have started down this path in the US and have had great success. Others have just started down this path in BC. I had the pleasure of going to the Nicola Valley to help Newayatch Indian Band and BC Wildlife Federation to build some beaver dam analogs in 2024. Beaver dam analogs are a man-made beaver dam. They are low-tech, low-cost approach to wetland restoration. They are just sticks in mud with posts inserted for added strength. They regulate stream flow and temperature, enhancing fish marine habitat and wildlife habitat. What better way to fix these areas than imitating the beaver? The focus should be at the headwaters, all for the purpose of preparing to reintroduce beavers back to the highlands. Having beavers upstream can decrease flood damage downstream. When we had beavers in the systems, we had more fish than we could count. Yes, fish can get through beaver dams and beaver dam analogs. These beaver dam analogs would be used to help kickstart the restoration. Beavers have been known to take over after BDAs have been put in place. Beavers manage water for everything on this planet. That is their job. More and more of our waterways have been drying up in the summertime now. Beavers can help change that and revive our wetlands. Water is life. People need to understand that beavers are a keystone species. They are the glue that holds habitats together. Their ponds are magnets for all wildlife. There used to be over 400 million beavers. At one point, they were trapped to near extinction for HATS, for Hudson Bay Company. Now they're an estimated 12 million beavers. That is a huge gap. Beavers create critical habitat for a vast number of species that depend on that habitat to survive. You'll see muskrat, mink, and otters and all sorts of birds come back. There are benefits pre-fire. Restored areas will protect riparian areas from fire and create natural fire breaks, refuge areas for animals during a fire, and benefits after a fire. Sediment capture from fire-affected areas. We need to slow that cold water back down, keep more of it in the high country for longer. When wetlands are re-engaged, you'll see the landscape transform from a dust bowl to a rich, vibrant oasis that supports lots of wildlife and plants. Wetlands are like a giant sponge that will soak up and hold water. You will hear some people talk about flooding from when a beaver dam breaks. These beaver dams and beaver dam analogs don't hold back tons and tons of water. The purpose is not to hold back massive amounts of water. These are in place to slow the water down like speed bumps and help spread the water out so it will soak back up into the ground and recharge the groundwater, the aquifer, and release it slowly over time throughout the year, which we desperately need. A beaver dam complex is a network of dams, dozens and dozens of dams backing each other up. So when we are looking at restoration with beaver dam analogs, we need to understand the more, the better. It is estimated we have lost 90% of our wetlands. It's not just one thing. It's stuff like agriculture development, clear cuts, draining for cattle grazing. We need to protect our waters from erosion that cattle cause. It is of great concern. We need to help manage them better and keep them out of the waterways and springs. Beavers will help improve rangeland for cattle. There are also simple flow devices, systems that can be installed like the beaver deceiver to help protect culverts from being dammed. Some people consider beavers pests, saying they keep flooding my land. Even a simple pond leveler can be installed on dams to avoid flooding so we can live in harmony with beavers. When I lived in the Nicola Valley, I used to trap beavers year after year when I was a teenager into my 20s, as a lot of people still flood irrigate their hayfields to this day. One day I just couldn't do it anymore. I figured there's got to be a better way, and started installing pond levelers with PVC pipe, which did the trick to help reduce the size of a beaver dam by letting water through. When you talk about the water, you must talk about the land, the forest, the wildlife, the plants. Like oxygen, we need all to survive. And what you must understand is everything is connected. When you take too much of something, it has a domino effect and everything around it suffers. There needs to be a balance. Every day, more species become extinct. Mother Nature has a way of replenishing itself if just given a chance. We need to work with nature, not against it. I feel I'm finally in a place to help make a difference rather than trying to convince other people in the work that needs to be done, because I'm getting tired of asking. I started building these BDAs on my own time. For the first time, I am in a position to help do the work that needs to be done, but we can't do it alone. We need your support because we want to build hundreds of these a year. This is where we would like to start. We have partnered with OIB and BC Wildlife Federation. This will be our showpiece of what a project like this can accomplish. It is the largest to date being implemented. It is about 7 kilometers long, 37 old beaver dam sites identified so far, and we didn't even get to the headwaters yet. But some are beyond repair. We want to patch the old intact beaver dams that have been opened up only 1 or 2 feet wide where the water runs through. There are 20 patchable old beaver dams, and we want to instill 49 BDAs on the bottom section. This waterway has everything wrong with it. It's a perfect example of what clear cutting does to a small stream. At the headwaters of both creeks, Cote and Inkmik, there are clear cuts, both badly degraded with lots of erosion, cattle erosion, landslides from flooding, and flooding at the mouth where setback berms have been installed to protect property. Floodplain, wetland are not re-engaged anymore. What better place to start a project than this? Another place we would like to work on is where I wanted to start this whole project in the first place, at the headwaters of Vasu Creek and McIntyre Creek, as this waterway is getting dangerously close to drying up in the summertime, which is an important spawning ground for salmon and Chinook, where it flows into the Okanagan River. We have so many fish coming back now, we need all the spawning areas that we can get. Shuttleworth Creek, for years, the water has gotten dangerously low, stranding hundreds of fish. O&A fishery staff have spent years collecting fish with buckets and bringing them back to the river. Also, Shingle Creek, Ellis Creek, Mission Creek, Nicola River, Salmon River, siwڵkʷ River are other places we would like to work on, as they are all important waterways. So what we're doing is we're going into the communities, asking for input on where beavers used to be or places that they think might support beavers. We are looking to involve all communities throughout our nation to help teach and support with this project so they can run with it and apply these methods around the headwaters in their areas as this needs to be done through the whole Okanagan and beyond. Limlin, thanks.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Delaney, and for your time today as well. We're so grateful as well to Emily, Coulter, and Delaney for sharing their knowledge and insight today. Unfortunately, Tremaine Edmo from the Blackfeet Nation was called away, but we will be bringing her on for an upcoming webinar. Before we wrap up, though, I was wanting to see if there's anyone with any questions for the speakers.
Hello.
What, Marlene?
YP's Naxilis, we sample siwڵkʷ stunx. I just had a bunch of observations. In terms of beaver, it's the sound of the water that makes them build. And so I was wondering, once you get them in there, how do you get them to stop? I noticed in the West Bank area, there was a dry water area. So I think you would have to go in and reintroduce some food for them, which could be cottonwood and willow. And I was also wondering about beaver fever monitoring, if there's something that you can you guys can test the waters downstream from for the possibility of beaver fever. And I'm not sure what you would do about those in the fire burn areas. If there's a way to reintroduce seeds that have deep roots, the something like sunflowers, willows, and cottonwood, and increase the fringe along the creeks, because the what happens after the burns is there's mudslides. And so if we can introduce plants that have really deep roots. The other thing is restoring swampy areas. The swamps act like a sponge and they purify the water of heavy metals and other things that are in the water. So that in those areas, introducing, we call it tuktan, but the tool and the bulrush. One of the ways that we used to get huckleberries back was just by burning areas. And so the seeds are in the ground, and that's what my dad used to do, is in areas that we wanted huckleberries. And in I did hear mention in the headwaters, I would recommend no logging, but allow spacing. And I also had concerns about Osuius Lake, the coldness of the water, to maintain water temperatures for the fish. Another thing is Bobtail Ranch was up for sale, and Bobtail had rerouted a lot of water from the bottom in Penticton area, the Penticton Indian Band area. And I know it might be sold already, but to retain the water rights and ensure that the Penticton Indian Band has access to water rights, even if it is resold. Waipis Nixia.
Lim,
I just for the beaver fever comment, I think beaver fever is a bit of a kind of a not a great name, because beaver fever is from Giardia, which is something it can be from other animals or people, or if so I don't think beavers would be an issue in terms of disease.
Another quick thing to note on the beaver fever Giardia issue is that there have been a lot of good monitoring studies on beavers going through relocations down in the States. And there's protocols from Utah State University. There's protocols from the Methow Beaver Project, which is quite close to y'all, for checking if the ones you have Giardia in their system. And if they do, you can very easily treat them and then move them. I believe the last paper I saw found an incidence of like 12% of beavers have Giardia in their bodies, which isn't that high. It's like 90% for muskrats. They're constantly full of it, but they don't get as sick. And most of that Giardia does originate from people or cattle. They just can get sick from the same waters, but they're not major vectors for us. They're not increasing the Giardia load in a big way.
thank you for clarifying that, Coulter and Emily. We have another question. We have a few questions actually. Can we start with Carrie Trebasket, please?
Limlimt, thank you to the presenters. Oh my gosh, such amazing information from all of you. So thank you for that. I guess I have a question and a comment. My question is with BDAs, do populate like human population levels impact the effectiveness of them? Like if you were to have it in more like closer to where people live, or use the space, does that impact the effectiveness? Like, does it need, yeah, what's the requirements around that? Also, I guess my comment is around community, and just how everything from I guess a scale worldview is around restoring and rebuilding community, and that includes stunx in this case. And so the education and the reconnection with our communities and our responsibilities to our relative out there is also a really important part. And I have a lot of gratitude. Delaney raised that in his presentation. I think that this might be a really good opportunity again, another opportunity, I guess, to bridge that Western science that is being brought forward in the BDAs with our community knowledge, but also just really focusing on relational rehabilitation too between our communities and our relative out there. Education, I think it was brought up in the chat, like education resources, a really good idea. And just maybe some historical information, getting people out on the land, building connections out there as well. Um, I think would be really cool. Of course, bringing in our artists and our creative people. My mind just going with all these ideas right now. I just loved this session. So thank you to everybody and for ONA for hosting.
Thanks, Carrie.
On the comment of beaver dam analogs in more populated areas, I think that that can go either way. It can be really detrimental if that community does not want them there, because it creates a system that's very novel and visually different, and people can get concerned about it and then worry about more beavers and then just sort of build up this resistance to the idea of beaver restoration. But when the community wants the beaver dam analogs there and wants the beavers, I think that increases the likelihood that they're successful, because when you don't have the beavers there working on it, sometimes you need a person to put that pine branch back in or to put another rock on or get a little bit of mud on there. And that the maintenance aspect is a really big difference between most BDAs and actual beaver wetlands. And so if your community is supporting the BDAs, I think you're more likely to achieve like true beaver ecosystem effects with them, even if we're the paws doing the work.
Thanks, Emily.
And with the with our project and moving forward, we're looking at just focusing more on the headwaters and getting beavers back up into the highlands there. As down in the valley bottom, there's still a lot of, like, even just in the past couple of years, there's still a lot of people who still see beavers in a negative light up and down the Okanagan Valley, like right in the Okanagan River. And I hear people constantly wanting to get a trapper in to trap them. So, we're trying to keep our project out of the valley bottom and just focus on the headwaters. And yeah, so.
Thanks, Delaney. We'll do the next question. Sheldon Lewis.
Thanks. For Emily, in your presentation, you kind of talked how the BDAs and the beaver dams are useful in holding back debris, silt, and whatnot, and filtering your waterways. My question is in relation to I guess the debris from forest fires, as well as the impact of the different chemicals sprayed up in the forest for broadleaf and controlling the ground management for forestry, the chemicals that are coming down. For OKIB, when I sat on chief and council, I think my last term, my last community meeting 2 years ago, we were talking about the water litigation, and in that we have a high rate of cancer in the 6 Mile area, and we have a high density of logging in the Aquesus Creek and the Nashweto Creek area. And what I was reading was that not only the chemicals, but also the ash particulates that come down in the waterways when mixed, coming down on their own, are obviously the chemicals aren't good, but the ash particulate coming down when mixed with chlorine starts to create cancer causing deals in the water. And on our Aquesis reservoir, we only have a screen filtration. On the Bradley Creek or no, the Irish Creek, we've moved to an infrared. Now, because we have such a high rate of cancer, obviously we're going to need to update our water filtration. But I'm wondering, having these BDAs and reintroducing the beavers into those waterways would or do you think that would have a positive impact on catching those type of particulates? I know they're very minute, because they obviously make it through the water filtration, but would having those beaver dams be a positive impact in possibly, obviously bringing our water quality up, but also removing some of those carcinogenics that are in the water?
That's a great question. I think it'll depend from particulate to particulate and what types of things can bind onto them. There have been a few good studies of beavers damming up the inlets and outlets of mine drainage that is full of really heavy metals like lead and arsenic and cadmium. And those metals are binding onto very fine particulates, sinking to the bottom and becoming buried in the sediment. And as long as the beaver dam is not catastrophically breached, as in like we remove it all at once, they can be naturally notched. They can have ebb and flows of beaver activity and the metals stay in the pond soil. So as long as you're not rooting around in the pond soil and drinking water directly from the soil, you will not encounter them. They're bound up. When we did one of these studies in Colorado, they did remove the beaver dams all at once and all of that material mobilized. And it's just a huge plume of contaminant going downstream. But with a lot of these kinds of very carcinogenic and difficult contaminants, it's not easy to destroy them. And the easiest thing is to bury them. And either we dig them up and bury them, or the beavers bury them, or maybe a combination. We dredge the beaver ponds for them every few years and bury those somewhere to get them extra out of the water. But they are very good. A lot of these contaminants will bind onto the superfine sediments and be carried with them until those superfines can settle. And they settle really well in beaver ponds. I do think that monitoring the water coming in and out of these ponds would be a good use of time, especially in these settings. We've seen very quick changes to pH, very quick changes to the suspended metals load. But once you know what your specific particulates of issue are, checking to see, are these binding or not? That's probably going to be the best mechanism of removal. Some of them may be microbially mediated, but I think that's going to be probably a longer timescale process.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. And I another question, and this might be out to all of you. I'm not sure who to kind of focus it to, but looking at the like the Wildlife Act regulates removal of beaver dams, and one of the I think it was I think Delaney had alluded to it about the ranchers. Obviously, when you're impacting irrigation, Wildlife Act kind of opens that door to ranchers, I'm assuming food producers, orchards, to come in and apply for those licenses to come in and remove it. And so also on Aquesis Creek, as well as Nashweto, on Nashweto, we have a very large cherry farm. Again, likely a lot more carcinogenics coming down from pesticides, as well as an Aquesis, a number of apple orchards and other orchards as well there too. And so I'm wondering at what point I guess, can you, or how do you fight back against if we were to say put BDAs in and it starts impacting irrigation for these mass orchards? How do you navigate that to obviously advocate for them, because we're wanting them to clean water, but they're impacting a business? And so as a Indian band, as a reserve, how strategically are you able to fight against that licensing to go and remove beaver dams? And on top of that, when we come in and put the BDAs, the man-made ones, do they fall under similar licensing kind of parameters. If we were to put BDAs in, man-made ones, does that get fought back against by people using irrigation? Does anybody? No?
I can't really speak to it too much because again, ours are kind of higher up in the watershed where it wouldn't really be affecting private land or businesses like that. And part of the process that BC Wildlife Federation uses is a pretty thorough assessment of downstream values. So I think to cover themselves, they probably would avoid conflicts like that and try and choose a different site. But that's kind of just my limited perspective on
in
it.
that, then that kind of leads into my last question was, is it more beneficial then to put those BDAs up higher? I mean, it would be nice to have them here below the orchards, because if we are collecting pesticides that are leaching in from groundwater, I mean, and I don't know the impact of BDAs, but it would be, I would assume that it would have some impact in removing some of that pesticides out of water, as Emily kind of alluded to. Some of those carcinogenics do attach, right? And so, do you find them more in higher ranges?
I think it kind of depends on the objective and on the values that you're trying to manage for, and so yeah, that's kind of
okay. I think that's kind of. I have a lot more questions, but those are some of my main ones, because our water quality here is we've seen a spike in cancer due to our water, and based on the water litigation that we have against Canada, we've successfully been able to add the impacts of cancer into that litigation. And so I'm just trying to figure out, strategically, how do we as a community start to fight back and build up and the health of our water systems to try to combat the impacts of cancer and carcinogenics.
I would note on that, just briefly, that beaver dam analogs in the headwaters are going to be doing a lot more work for water storage, water delay, drought buffering, things like that. But it's totally valid to want beaver dams and beaver dam analogs lower down for other benefits, like the water purification next to your communities. With big Uber producers like orchards and ag, I've run into challenges with that in a number of the states I've worked in, including California. And I've seen a few different approaches to working with them. Sometimes it's successful enough to just say, we're trying to do this to clean up our water. Like, please let us do this so that we don't need to drag you through the court system about what you're doing to the water. And that can be enough, because then the orchard is like, whatever, like it's this or a huge lawsuit. Another option that people have taken is say, can you please show me with data that my BDA is actually impacting your irrigation? And if they can't collect the data to prove a real negative impact, it's harder for them to get frustrated about it. And you can always ask, like, prove that this BDA did this. A lot of the times, what I've seen happen is it just gets dragged out and out and out and out, and eventually someone gets tired of arguing. And if you think you can withstand the arguments longer, you have a better shot of making it through, then I think that can be a really effective strategy. And tangling up big entities in lawsuits can also be a really effective strategy, but they're not inexpensive, and they're also not fun. It's tough being constantly in fights with your neighbors. Even if your neighbors are not good neighbors, it's a difficult situation to be in. So there's not like a one right way to do it, but I think demanding data from the bigger entity is a very valid path forwards, and one that I think they often know how to respond to. And then they'll spin up a 3-year study, and then you have 3 years of the BDA in place while they try to study it.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. Maybe just one quick one. Coulter, Marlene had mentioned reintroduction of cottonwoods as a food source. Is WFN, because I know you guys had been impacted by the wildfire. I'm not sure if the community forest was, because that's kind of more south. But I do know that we here at OKIB had pushed for a lot of deciduous and other trees other than lumber bearing trees in the reintroduction efforts when we were planting. And I'm just wondering, curious how you guys are managing that. And if, I mean, obviously it's your forest, you can do what you want, but do you get any pushback from the forestries around that argument of like, look, we need to put deciduous in? And that's my last question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, we did get impacted about 8,000 hectares of our community forest burn, so quite substantial. We did do some kind of riparian restoration work on a few drainages, planting native plants other than yeah, conifers. And there's not really we didn't experience any pushback on that. I think it's it's becoming more widely accepted now, and being introduced into stocking standards and things like that. So there is kind of movement in the right direction there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That was an awesome presentation. I hope that we can continue following up with this in each of our communities. I think it's great work.
So I think education is key. I think that's kind of what's missing. Just simple conversations of explaining what these BDAs do. Cleaning up the water and storing water and slowly releasing it over time. So, it's actually beneficial for irrigation because they'll have access to more water throughout the year instead of. So I think that's kind of the biggest hurdle right there is just the educating people about it. With our BDAs, we haven't talked about a whole lot of planting, but we've talked about live staking like willows and dogwood, like preparing areas to get ready, for food for the beavers and stuff like that. We haven't gotten to a whole lot of the other deciduous trees, just been kind of looking at those two, I think, for now. Yeah.
And sorry, I just wanted to add something in too. For the idea about monitoring water quality around these projects, there's been somebody with the province that I've been talking to about funding to do that, and they've got money and they're very keen to help us spend it. And at the moment, it's more of a capacity issue on our end to organize that. But if there's any community members that want to see that happen and have projects that they want to attach that kind of monitoring to, please get in touch with Delaney or me. I'm Casey Moran with ONA. So yeah, you just let me know and we can try and spend some of the province's money on monitoring water quality around these projects.
Thanks for the questions, Sheldon, and for the answers as well, Emily and Coulter and Delaney. I think we have time for one last question, even though we're a little bit over. I think we had Kirsten in here, but maybe she actually logged off. Oh, well, that's okay. Just to wrap up today, I'm really grateful everyone's here and got to hear from our amazing presenters. As we move forward, I hope that everyone can carry the understanding that we are not separate from the water, we are part of it. And beavers are always showing us how to work with the land, not against it, and always leading the way on how we can return to those practices that support balance and resilience and are to me. So, as a reminder, we will be having more lunchtime webinars in the future, and we're going to be covering different topics, so please stay tuned for those updates and posters. If you have any more questions or ideas, or if you'd like to get involved, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll also be sharing the recording for those who weren't able to join or would like to reference in the future. So lim to everyone and the presenters for your time today, and we really look forward to continuing this work together.